of people. So you're going to get saturated with Judaism.
Oh, good.
Okay. Yeah. My all-time record for low attendance was about 14 years ago. It was the opening night of the fair, and there were 3 of us. So pretty good, actually. Okay, we'll start our service on page 10 with Hine Matovu Manayim. I don't know. I'll start singing and then you'll know. Okay. Hine Matovu Manayim Shevet Ahim Gam Yachad. Hine Matovu Manayim Shevet Ahim Gam Yachad. Hine Matov Shevet Ahim Gam Yachad. Hine Matov Shevet Ahim Gam Yachad. Hine Matov Umanayim Shevet Ahim Gam Yachad. Hine Matov Umanayim Shevet Ahim Gam Yachad. The last time I led a service, I made the mistake of calling on the men to light the candles, and had the women not intervened, we'd still be here from 2 months ago. So this time I'm going to call on the women to light the candles. And those who wish, would you please come forward? And the blessing is on page 2. Jane, do you want to do the honors?
Okay. Sure, thank you.
Okay.
All right, Jane.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu l'hadlik ner shel Shabbat. Amen. Thank you. And you can stay standing. We're going to continue with the Kiddush on page 5. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kadsho, v'achavav ratzon hinheltanu, zikaron l'mahaseh v'reishit, ki hu yom tehila l'mikrei kodesh, zecher l'tziat mitzrayim, ki vanu v'harta, v'yotanu kidashta, kol hamim, v'shabbat kadshecha, v'achavav ratzon hineltanu, Baruch atah Adonai mikadesh haShabbat. Amen. Please be seated. And we'll continue our service on the next page, page 6. And let's read responsively at the bottom. And I'll begin. May the door of this synagogue be wide enough to receive all who hunger for love, all who are lonely for friendship. May the door of this synagogue be narrow enough to shut out pettiness and pride, envy and enmity. May it be too high to admit complacency, selfishness, and harshness. We'll continue on page 20 with L'Chadodi, and we'll sing the first two verses, and then stand for the last verse, turn to the rear door, and welcome the Sabbath bride. And there's so many tunes, I hope I am going to hit the one that you're familiar with. L'Chadodi lekrat kala panei Shabbat nikabala. L'Chadodi lekrat kala panei Shabbat nikabala. Shamur v'zakur b'dibur echad. Yishmi'anu el hamyuchad. Adonai echad u'shmo echad. L'shem ultifaret v'litila. L'chadodi likrat kala. Panei Shabbat nikabala. Likrat Shabbat likuv nacha. Ki hi mekur habracha. Merosh mikedem nisucha. Sof mahaseb mashtavat hila. L'chadodi likrat kala. Panei Shabbat nikabala. L'chadodi likrat kala. Panei Shabbat nikabala. Be'ov v'shalom aterech bala. Gam b'simcha uv'sachala. To'ef emunei am segula. Boi kala, boi kala. L'chadodi likrat kala. Panei Shabbat nikabala. L'chadodi likrat kala. Panei Shabbat nikabala. Please be seated and turn to page 24. Shalom Aleichem. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei HaShoresh, Malachei Elyon, Mihi Melech, Malachei HaMlochim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Boachem l'shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Mihi Melech, Malachei Hamlochim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu ni l'shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon. Mihi Melech, Malachei Hamlochim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Seitzem l'shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi melech, Malachei Hamlochim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We'll continue with, on page 26, with the Hatzikadosh. Would anyone like to do it? Okay. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shomei rabba. Yamal divrach hirute v'yamlich malkute v'chahayechon uvyamechon uvhayedachal beit Yisrael. Bahagala uvizmahan kahariv v'yimaru. Amen. Yeshmei rabba mivorach le'olam le'ol maya yitporach. Yitporach v'yishtabach v'yitvar v'yitraman v'yisnaseh v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shamei dekudasha barichu le'la mincha berchata v'shirata tushbachata v'nehemata dahamihiran b'yama v'yamaru. Amen. Continue our service on page 28 with the Shema. Baruch Adonai Hamborach. Oh. Wait a minute, I'm confused here. Oh, yes, okay, pardon me. Okay. Okay. We do have 2 Torahs. Okay. Okay. Baruch hu et Adonai hamavorach. Baruch Adonai hamavorach le'olam va'ed. Let's turn the page and continue together in the English. Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who speaks the evening into being, skillfully opens the gates, thoughtfully alters the time and changes the seasons, and arranges the stars in their heavenly courses according to plan. You are creator of day and night, rolling light away from darkness and darkness from light, transforming day into night and distinguishing one from the other. Adonai Tzevaot is your name. Ever-living God, may you reign continually over us into eternity. Blessed are you, Adonai, who brings on evening. Baruch atah Adonai hama'ariv aravim. And on page 32 together, everlasting love you offered your people Israel by teaching us Torah and mitzvot, laws and precepts. Therefore, Adonai our God, when we lie down and when we rise up, we will meditate on your laws and your commandments. We will rejoice in your Torah forever. Day and night we will reflect on them, for they are our life, and doing them lengthens our days. Never remove your love from us. Praise to you, God, who loves your people Israel. Baruch atah Adonai, hahev amo Yisrael. And now on page 34, the Shema. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Or Shem Kavod Malchuto, Leolam Va'ed. And let's read this together in English on page 36. You shall love Adonai your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. Take to heart these instructions with which I charge you this day. Impress them upon your children. Recite them when you stay at home and when you are away, when you lie down and when you get up. Bind them as a sign on your hand and let them serve as a symbol on your forehead. Inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Thus you shall remember to observe all my commandments and to be holy to your God. I am Adonai your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I am Adonai your God. Adonai Elohechem Emet. We will continue on page 40 with Michamocha. And let's do the first stanza in Hebrew, the second in English, and the third in Hebrew. Michamocha. Give me the tune. Ba'elim Adonai michamocha nehedar b'kodesh Nora tehilot oseh fele Nora tehilot oseh fele. Your children witnessed your sovereignty, the sea splitting before Moses and Miriam. This is our God, they cried. Adonai will reign forever and ever. V'nemar. Yeah, nope. I don't know this. Let's do it in English then. Thus it is said, Adonai redeemed Jacob from a hand stronger than his own. Praised are you, Adonai, for redeeming Israel. Baruch atah Adonai, Go'al Yisrael. And continue together on the next page, 42. Grant, O God, that we lie down in peace, and raise us up, our guardian, to life renewed. Spread over us the shelter of your peace. Guide us with your good counsel. For your name's sake, be our help. Shield and shelter us beneath the shadow of your wings. Defend us against enemies, illness, war, famine, and sorrow. Distance us from wrongdoing. For you, God, watch over us and deliver us. For you, God, are gracious and merciful. Guard our going and coming to life and to peace evermore. Blessed are you, Adonai, guardian of Israel, whose shelter of peace is spread over us, over all your people Israel, and over Jerusalem. Baruch atah Adonai, haporei sukat shalom aleinu, v'al kol amo Yisrael, v'al Yerushalayim. We continue on page 44. And please stand as you are able. And let's do together. Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat lasod et ha-Shabbat l'doratam barit olam. Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat lasod et ha-Shabbat l'doratam barit olam. B'nei uvein b'nei Yisrael od hili olam, od hili olam, od hili olam. Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat lasod et ha-Shabbat l'doratam barit olam. Ki sheshes yamim asa Adonai et hashamayim v'et ha'oretz v'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat lasod et ha-Shabbat l'doratam barit olam. Ki sheshes yamim asa Adonai et hashamayim v'et ha'oretz v'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat so et ha-Shabbat l'doratam barit olam. Uvayom hashvi'i shavat v'yinafash, shavat v'yinafash, shavat v'yinafash. Vishamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat lasod et ha-Shabbat l'doratam barit olam. We continue standing and turn to page 46, please. Adonai siftiati v'la uv'yagid hilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. We will now do the Amidah, the silent prayer, from page 48 through 62. You can do this in any language you wish, Hebrew, English, Aramaic, Greek, whatever. But what you should do is take a moment to consider what your behavior has been, and our behavior has been this past week. Have we been righteous? Have we treated other people the way that we should? Have we made mistakes that we wish to correct? Have we done good things? And what will we do next week? That's what the focus should be. Okay? And feel free to be seated when you're finished. Prayer on page 62, which for most of my life I've been calling the lawyer's prayer. It starts, and let us read it together. My God, guard my speech from evil and my lips from deception. Before those who slander me, I will hold my tongue. I will practice humility. Open my heart to your Torah, that I may pursue your mitzvot. As for all who think evil of me, cancel their designs and frustrate their schemes. Act for your own sake, for the sake of your power, for the sake of your holiness, for the sake of your Torah, so that your loved ones may be rescued. Save with your power and answer me. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable to you, Adonai, my rock and redeemer. Oh, say shalom b'mramav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'yidru ve'yamaru, amen. Say shalom, yahaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, yahaseh shalom, yahaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. May the one who makes peace in the high heavens make peace for us, for all Israel, and for all who inhabit the earth. And let us say, Amen. I think this sermon is overkill for the size of the crowd, but we're going for it. We're going for it. Okay. Whenever I have the honor to lead a service, and we all do this, I always check the Torah portion for that week in hopes that I will get inspired. Some portions are better than others, and this week's portion didn't speak to me at all, not a bit. But it did trigger some religious concepts like truth and justice. So those were the guideposts that I used to prepare my sermon. And in preparing the sermon, and just to start the process, I always start with a working title. And this week I started with America, Love It or Leave It. It just came to me. Some of you will remember it was a bumper sticker in the 60s and the 70s, America, Love It or Leave It. And that meant to me, when I saw it, that the owner of the car was for the Vietnam War and against anyone who dared to protest it. He was the Okie from Muskogee. And that's not the America that I want to live in, so I dropped that title. It didn't last very long. The America that I want seeks to do justice and encourages honest dissent. And those are both very positive goals which we should cherish. But for a lot of reasons, we find ourselves now in an extremely polarized nation. Our communities are polarized, and even down to our families. We can no longer communicate freely with each other on important issues that we all care about. Have you ever tried to talk to someone about abortion or Donald Trump? And if that person disagrees with you, I'm telling you, it doesn't matter which side you're on, it's a very difficult confrontation and situation. Many states are now enacting legislation that makes it more difficult to peacefully protest. This is happening under the radar. But for example, Iowa has just eliminated civil liability for certain drivers who hit people participating in an unauthorized demonstration in the street. You can understand that how would a driver know whether a demonstration was authorized or not? Okay. Well, there's already been one truck that plowed through a group of demonstrators in Iowa, and there have been no repercussions whatsoever. A dear friend of mine is a Buddhist priest, and I know what he would say. And he would say, so what are you going to do about it? Very Buddhist. Okay. So I gave that an appropriate period of meditation, and I have an idea as to how we might approach this. And because I'm going to be discussing current events tonight, it's likely that some of you may not agree with what I have to say on any given matter. And I want to say it's not important at all whether you agree with me. What is important is that you actually listen to me and understand my position and the basis for my position. And then I would like you to tell me why you disagree and what the basis of your disagreement is, if we disagree. And I will listen without interruption. If I could patent this idea, I would call it conversation. Remember what that was? We used to have that. I've lived long enough to know, and so have you, that no matter where we find ourselves on any given issue, there are going to be people who disagree with us. And if we believe in our Constitution and the right of free speech, then we're going to fight to the death to preserve the right of people to speak their minds, even if we don't like what they have to say. Everyone who disagrees with us is not our enemy. Everyone who disagrees with us is not our enemy. We should not be so self-righteous as to say my way or no way. There is still room in this country for dissent, at least today. It was President Dwight Eisenhower who told the country in the early 50s, at the height of the anti-communist witch hunt, he said, these are his words, "May we never confuse honest dissent with disloyal subversion." If we are pressured by our government, our communities, and our neighbors to speak with only one cautious voice, we will lose our democracy. In a democratic society, the only treason is silence. What makes America special to me is that, and I'm going to quote Anna Quindlen of Newsweek, and she wrote this 20 years ago. These are her words. "We have the right to elect leaders, to watch what they do through the vehicle of a free press, and then, if we choose, to damn them for doing it in coffee houses, at home, from the steps of the courthouse or the State House, in private and in public too. If we lose the right to protest, and we compel our fellow citizens to not criticize the government, and we fail to protect minorities and unpopular points of view, then how is our society any different from that created by Putin? Achieving justice and being able to freely dissent go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. We've all experienced very memorable moments when we were mesmerized by a public event. I mean the kind of event which is mind-blowing, as the kids would say. It takes over our lives such that we can't do anything else except think about what just happened. I've given a lot of thought to what public events were, for me, monumental. And the first time that happened, I was young. It was in April of 1945. I was a little kid. My dad took me to Franklin Roosevelt's funeral. And I sat on his shoulders and I looked out and I saw 1 million people, which is an incredible experience. There wasn't a sound to be heard except for the horse-drawn caisson carrying Roosevelt's casket draped with the flag. There was the honor guard and a few motorcycles, but really there wasn't a sound. The only sound I can remember are the sound of the horses' hoofs on the street. And 1 million people and not a sound. When the casket passed by, there was total silence for what seemed like the longest time, and then people began to weep. The next time that happened to me was in May of 1948 when Israel became a country. And again in 1954 when Brown versus the Board of Education, which outlawed school segregation, was decided. And again in 1961 when I saw the bravery of the Freedom Riders in the beginning of the Civil Rights Movement. And then in 1963 when President Kennedy was shot. And 1968 when Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy were shot. And in '69 when Neil Armstrong landed on the moon. And many more over the years, including 9/11 and Hurricane Katrina, because I have family and friends in New Orleans. Okay. Over the years since Brown versus Board of Education, there have been many Supreme Court decisions which have been momentous to me. The most recent was the overruling of Roe versus Wade on June 24th. I just will tell you, I was in Stockholm that day, and Swedish women cried. That reminded me of the two cases that the Supreme Court had decided in June 2013 that paved the way for same-sex marriage, different courts. In 2013, the Supreme Court ruled that the Defense of Marriage Act was unconstitutional. Those were truly historic rulings because they set the stage for approval of same-sex marriage and what I hoped would be the end of institutional discrimination against gays and lesbians. And I'm happy that justice was done in those cases, at least in my eyes, but what may seem just and fair to me may be completely unjust in the eyes of someone else. I understand that. In order to help me understand the concept of justice, I looked up the modern dictionary definition, which read in relevant part as follows, and I'll read it. Justice is a concept of moral rightness based on ethics, rationality, law, natural law, religion, equity, or fairness, as well as the administration of the law, taking into account the inalienable and inborn rights of all human beings and citizens, the right of all people and individuals to equal protection before the law of their civil rights, without discrimination on the basis of race, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, national origin, color, ethnicity, religion, disability, age, or any other characteristic, and is further regarded as being inclusive of social justice. That was a pretty good definition. It was all-inclusive. It took into account modern legislation, judicial decisions. I can deal with that definition. But then I thought, I'll look to the Bible, see what that has to say. Well, not surprisingly, it says a lot. In Deuteronomy 16:20, we are commanded by God as follows: Justice, justice shall thou pursue. The Lord thy God giveth thee. In Hebrew, tzaddik asher Adonai Elohecha noten loch. These passionate words may be taken as the keynote of the humane legislation of the Torah and of the demand for social righteousness by Israel's prophets, psalmists, and sages. It was Amos who said, "Let justice roll down as waters and righteousness as a mighty stream." Justice is not the only ethical quality in God or man, nor is it the highest quality, but it is the basis for all the others. Righteousness and justice are the foundations of thy throne, says the psalmist. The whole idea of the divine rests on them. The pursuit of justice is also an important theme throughout the New Testament. There are many, many, many examples, but my personal favorite is this one. He who follows the letter of the law but denies its spirit does not do justice. As a student of law and history, it's obvious to me that when important social issues reach a court, they then become political judicial decisions. For example, slavery was once legal, as was global segregation. Women were not allowed to vote. But when the politics of the country changed, so too did the law on those issues. In my own life and professional career, and you don't all know this, but I'm a lawyer, I've experienced many times this phenomenon. I understand what causes the law to change on these kinds of political cases. Some years ago, I spoke here about how the Danes saved their Jews. I was very curious to find out why that happened in Denmark. Less than 70 Jews died in Denmark during the war. I was curious to find out why that happened there and not in many other countries. So I went to Denmark to learn why, and I found the answer. The answer was that the Jews were part of the Danish community. They were not segregated in ghettos, as in Poland, where 3 million of us died. Rather, they were fully assimilated into every segment of Danish life. So when Hitler ordered the Danish Jews to wear a yellow star, King Christian declared that if the Jews had to do it, then all the other Danes would do it. And so, as a consequence, no Dane ever wore a yellow star. No Jewish Dane ever wore a yellow star. When the Gestapo came for the Danish Jews, they had been successfully hidden by the Danes and had escaped to Sweden. And that leads me to the question, why did we get a Supreme Court that was willing to rule in favor of same-sex marriage back in 2013? And I think I know the answer, and I think you do too. And here's the answer, at least for me. When I was in high school in the 50s, there were no gays. It was simple. They didn't exist. I never heard the term. I had no concept about it. But then I went back for my 50th reunion, and I learned that the president of the student body was gay, the president before him, a star running back on the football team, a guy I used to wrestle with on the wrestling team, the editor of the school paper was lesbian. Quite a few friends of my friends from those days were gay and lesbian. I wasn't surprised to learn that, given 50 years of life experience. But I had to think long and hard about how difficult it must have been for them to pretend to be something that they were not, and how unfair it was. In 2008, which was not that long ago, we here in California passed Proposition 8. You may remember that. That banned same-sex marriages. All of the polls at that time showed that the country was against same-sex marriage. And then just 5 years later, in 2013, the same polls showed that the country was in favor of it. And in some age groups, such as young folks, They favored it by an overwhelming margin. So the question becomes, what happened in those 5 years to change public opinion? That was the fastest civil rights revolution in the history of the world, I think. In 2008, it's banned, and in 2013, it's a constitutional right. 5 years. What happened was the gays came out of the closet. It was very hard to do, but there were brave souls who took a public stand, sometimes at great personal sacrifice. So as a nation, we learned that there were gays in business, in government, in our churches and synagogues, in entertainment, professional sports, indeed in all occupations and in all walks of life. So like the Jews in Denmark, the gays and the lesbians are now part of our communities. They are our sisters and our brothers, our children, our friends, and our coworkers. We know them as people, and so we're no longer afraid of them. When the Supreme Court makes rulings which protect the rights of a minority by granting them equality, such as the gays, then all of us are more free, because if any one group can be legally discriminated against, then at any time we too can be legally discriminated against. We know from the overruling of Roe versus Wade that what the Supreme Court giveth, the Supreme Court can taketh away. That was chillingly articulated in a concurring opinion by Justice Clarence Thomas, in which he suggested that the court revisit cases like Roe, which had conferred constitutional rights that are not enumerated in the Constitution, such as gay marriage, same-sex marriage, and there are many others. It doesn't say in the Constitution that you have a right to an attorney if you're charged with a crime. So using that reasoning, they can take away all the constitutional rights that have been granted in the last 200 years, if they wanted to do it. You don't need to be a constitutional lawyer to know that these kinds of decisions, which take away constitutional rights and oppress identifiable minority groups, are simply not just. But they reflect the composition of the court, and the law is what the court says it is. So those of us who care about justice and equality and protection of minorities and those sorts of things, we're in for a very hard time right now. There's another problem in our body politic, and that's former President Trump. He has succeeded in creating an environment where if he is attacked for his conduct, that then becomes a political matter. So in Trump's words, any investigation into his conduct, regardless of the conduct, is labeled a political witch hunt. I'm here to tell you that's a huge mistake, and we can't buy into that. If a president sponsors a trade bill with Mexico, and I don't like that trade bill, then I have a policy difference with the president, and that's political. But if that president shoots and kills a child in a crosswalk, then I'm going to do everything that I possibly can to have that person charged with a crime and prosecuted. There is nothing political about holding the president to account for criminal conduct. There is nothing political about holding the president to account for criminal conduct. It's not political, it's not Republican, it's not Democrat, it's not independent. It's what did he do? Was it a crime? This is not a difficult concept. We know from the January 6 hearings and the testimony of his children and of countless Republicans who were all political appointees of President Trump, that beginning in November 2020 and continuing through January 6th, he was continuously told by his family, his cabinet officers, his vice president, and his entire White House staff that he lost the 2020 presidential election to Joe Biden. But Trump refused to accept that loss even after he lost 60 different lawsuits challenging the election all across the country. Instead, what he did is he led a criminal conspiracy to overthrow the election through a myriad of illegal activities, which included pressuring legislators and elected officials to falsify election results in his favor. He caused fake electors to be presented to Congress, and he assembled a mob, which we now know he knew was armed and dangerous because the Secret Service told him before he spoke to them. He knew that many persons had body armor, assault rifles, and all sorts of guns and other weapons. And that's what we learned from the January 6th committee, and we learned it from Republicans who worked in the White House. Knowing that, Trump urged the mob to march on the Capitol to intimidate Vice President Pence to reject the votes of lawful electors. When the Secret Service refused to take him to the Capitol with the mob, Trump installed himself in the presidential dining room at the White House, and he watched the mob invade the Capitol on Fox News for 3 hours and 7 minutes. And during all of that time, he failed and refused to do anything to protect the Capitol or the embattled Capitol Police. He saw the mob, as we all did who watched television that day, he saw the mob smash a fire extinguisher on a policeman's head, use flagpoles as spears against the police, beat officers even when they were down, and then invade the Senate chamber and the offices of legislators. And he did nothing. Nothing. He did not call in the military. He did not call in more police. And he rejected the pleas from his family, his White House staff, members of Congress, and even Fox News personalities Sean Hannity and Laura Ingraham to call off the mob. Instead, he watched the mob on TV attack the Capitol and its police officers, build a gallows, and chant, "Hang Mike Pence." And when he was directly asked by his staff and his family to protect the vice president, he replied in essence, "Pence deserved it." People died that day, and over 100 Capitol police officers were seriously injured, and we all know it could have been much worse. Trump's conduct was criminal. He led an armed coup against the peaceful transfer of power, which undermined our democracy and threatened all of us. It was not Republican conduct. It was criminal conduct, and there's a huge difference. In my opinion, and through my eyes as a former prosecutor and a trial lawyer, it's extremely important that Trump be prosecuted for these crimes if we are to be a nation of laws. In my America, no person is above the law. And if Trump is not prosecuted, then he or any other person in a similar position is free to do it again because there would be no consequences. I am hopeful that he will be prosecuted, and I think he will. And if he is, the repercussions are going to be dramatic. It's important that we here in this room understand the difference between politics and criminality. It falls on each of us to bring about justice here, which means that we will need to educate our friends and our countrymen that if Trump is prosecuted, it will be because of his criminal conduct and not for political reasons. It has nothing to do with any political activity he ever engaged in. The prophet Isaiah reminds us that God the Holy shall be shown holy by his justice. Throughout the Bible, we are told over and over again to pursue justice and to seek justice. The prophet Micah taught us that what God wants from us is to do justice and to love mercy and to walk humbly with God. So here's the bottom line. Justice is an elusive concept and it doesn't grow on trees. We are a minority. We need justice. In order to get justice, it's going to take hard work by all of us. God has taught us that we have to pursue justice. So if we want justice from the Supreme Court, and if we want justice to result from Trump's criminal conduct, then we have to work for it. We have to talk about it. And we need to educate our fellow citizens so that they and we can do everything we can to preserve and strengthen constitutional protections for minorities and to insist on the application of the rule of law, even for and especially for a former president. Thank you. We'll continue our service on page 253. And I confess, I never can remember the tunes for the Mishi Beirach. 150 times I've probably sung them, and I just have mental blocks. So Naomi, help me. Okay.
Do you want to do that, who we're doing it for first?
Well, I will read the list, and then when we get to the prayer, I will need your help.
Okay.
Okay. May the one who blessed our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, bless these members of our community. Heather Becker, Joan Bloomfield, Robin Cohn, Marcia Gay Gans, Evelyn Gross, David Hayes, Diana Heller, Rob Hirsch, Panina Collicant, Barbara Kurtzman, Kit Levine, Sharon Maslow, Rick Moss, Dave Podolsky, Anastasia Rolo-Limos, Margaret Schmidt, Elliot Schwartz, Cheryl Schellub, John Sitters, Melanie Spielman, and Larry Karras. And I ask you if you have names, please feel free to shout them out. Okay? Okay? Okay. We pray that you will send them all comfort and relief speedily in our days and grant them a complete healing of body, mind, and spirit. Blessed are you, source of life, who helps us to bring light where there is darkness and healing where there is brokenness. Hera avotein, Kur habraha lemotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. Amen. Shihi behera ihimotenu, Makur habracha lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlima, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit. And let us say, Amen. I would like now to call on Jackie Ramsdell, our president, for announcements, but Jackie's not here. So what is the backup plan? I'm sorry?
Read the bulletin, it's all in the bulletin.
Read the bulletin.
Shul by the pool is coming up. I know that. There's book club. Birthdays, anniversary. And there's that. And Mahjong. Mahjong is coming up. So we can do the birthday. Do you have the birthday and anniversary? That's on the bottom of the Mishabera. She does that.
No, it's not.
How about the York side list? It's on the bottom of one of those.
Okay. Here it is. We have one birthday today, David Edsel. Happy birthday. And that's it. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Jackie. Okay. And we'll continue on page 282. And please stand. This is the Aleinu, and we'll do the version in the middle of the page. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, l'ateit gedula liotzer bereshit, shelo asanu kegoye haratzot, v'lo samanu kamishpachot hadama, shelo sam helkenu kahem, v'gohor aleinu kekol hamonam, Banachnu korim, umishtachavim umodim, lifnei melech malchei hamlachim, hakadosh baruch hu. And on the next page, Shahu noteh shamayim Yosef haaretz, umoshav yikaro b'shamayim mimal, ushkinatu zo, Begahe mahiromim, hu Eloheinu, Einod, emet makenu, efes zulato, kakohatu batorahato, viadato hayom, v'hashivota, el levavecha, ki Adonai hu Elohim b'shamayim mima'al, v'al ha'oretz mitachat ein od. V'nemar v'hoya Adonai lamelech al kol ha'oretz v'yom ha'hu Bayom hahu yeh Adonai echad. Ushemo, Ushemo, Ushemo echad. Please be seated. We're going to go to the Mourner's Kaddish, which is on page 294. And while you're turning there, we remember this Shabbat Joshua Gross, husband of Evelyn Gross and father of Naomi Blakely, David Krieger, cousin of Jane Sachs, Ann Olin, aunt of Jane Sachs, Robert Shapiro, brother of Ken Shapiro, Floyd Rubin, father of Nancy Ostron, and Florence Kurtzman, mother of Chip Kurtzman. We remember Charlotte Shai Nach, aunt of Michelle Shearer Robles, and Dawn Shearer Daner, and Rebecca Woolis, Naomi Blakely's cousin who passed away this month. And we take into our hearts all those who have no one to say Kaddish for them. Naomi, would you come forward and light the Kaddish candle, the yahrzeit candle? We think of our loved ones whom death has recently taken from us, those who died at this season in years past, and those whom we have drawn into our hearts with our own. May their memories be for blessing. And please stand and join me in the Kaddish. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, b'alma divra chirusei, b'amlich malchusei, v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chaye dechol Beit Yisrael, V'agala v'zman kari v'yamaru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mavarach, v'yom me'almaya, yisbarach v'yishtabach v'yispoar v'yisroman v'yisnaseh, v'yisadar v'yisaleh v'yisalal shemei dekudisha b'richu. Ve'elah min kol berchota v'shirata, tushvachata v'ne'amata, damiron v'yoma v'yamaru amen. Yehei shlama Rabbah min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael, V'yamaru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'yamaru amen. Please be seated. I'd like to conclude with Adon Olam, and I think it's on page 321. And there are at least 500 different melodies to this song. I've sung it to She'll Be Coming Around the Mountain, everything you can imagine. But my favorite is the old beer hall melody, and you know it. It's Adon Olam Asher Malach V'teren Kol Yitzir Nifrach Adon Olam Lies Naso Behepsakol Azai Melesh Shemo Nikra Adon Olam Asher Malach V'teren Kol Yitzir Nifrach Lies naso, behepsakol, azay melech shemo nikra Adon Olam, v'yacharei kiklot hakol, levahado yimloch nora Adon Olam, v'hu haya, v'hu have, v'hu yeh b'tifara Adon Olam, asher malach, v'teren kol, yitzir nivrach, Lies naso, behepsakol, azay melech shemo nikra Adon Olam, v'hu echad, v'yein sheni, v'ham shilo lecha bira Adon Olam, v'li reshid, v'li tachlit, v'lo hoz, v'ham yisra Adon Olam, asher malach, v'teren kol, yitzir nivrach, Lies naso, behepsakol, azay melech shemo nikra Adon Olam, V'hu Eli v'hai goali, v'tzurtiv libi esara Adon Olam, v'hu nisi umanos li, manas kosi b'yom ekra Adon Olam, Asher Malach, v'teren kol, Yitzir Nivrach, Le'es Naso, V'hepsakol, Zayin Melech Shemo Nikra Adon Olam, V'yado Avki Ruhi, V'yesi Shan V'yohira Adon Olam, V'i Ruhi Geviyati, Adon Oili V'lo Ira Adon Olam, Asher Malach, V'teren Kol, Yitzir Nivrach, Le'es Naso, V'hepsakol, Zayin Melech Shemo Nikra Adon Olam. Good Shabbos. Thank you.